My guest in this episode is Sonia Adams, Global Chief Client Officer for GHD, the multinational technical professional services firm. She is also the past president of the Australasian Professional Services Marketing Association. Sonia's career started in politics, moved to accounting when she was Director of Sales and Marketing for PwC in Sydney, and then joining GHD in 2009. She describes herself as a right-brain creative who learnt early on in her career how to really connect with left brain. On a professional level, she has become comfortable in not always fitting in. She says standing out is her superpower. I can't wait to find out what other superpowers she has. Welcome to the podcast, Sonia.
Hi, Graham. Thanks. Great to be here.
It's lovely to see you. Now, I don't know if you've listened to any of these episodes before, but what I tend to do in these interviews is I go straight into what you were at the very beginning, before your career even started, because I'm always keen to know how people's, what they studied and why it is they chose these things to study. And I know that you graduated with a degree in communications. And, why did you choose that degree? What did you want to be when you were young?
Do you know the crazy thing? I actually wanted to be one of the first high-flying female corporate lawyers. And so law was actually my first choice. And there really weren't any big role models at the time, So think back, this is in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I would be flogging a dead horse and I'd never made partner. And, it would be a long and winding road. And I had always really fancied, if I wasn't going to be a high-flying lawyer, maybe I might break big international news stories on 60 Minutes when it used to be, the peak of investigative journalism. So yes, I fancied myself as a hard-hitting journo in war zones and political crises.
And you've pretty much ended up in professional services, which some would argue is the same thing.
Same.
So that's interesting. You saw yourself as a high flyer. Why? What was it about you then where you were like, I'm not just going to be this, I'm going to be the best at this?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's the blind faith of ambition when you're young. And so you think the world's your oyster and you'll take on all comers. But yeah, I've always been driven to be the best. I didn't wake up in the morning and decide to come second.
Very interesting. We'll get into all of that later. Tell me about your first foray into the world of work then. What was it that you went into first?
I actually did an internship while I was at uni back in the days when the ACT was governed by the federal government, and they first decided that they would have self-government for the Northern Territory and for Canberra for the ACT. So they set up the Chief Minister's Department and the ACT Public Service. So I went as an intern over the summer in the Chief Minister's office and wrote 6 or 8 press releases a day and got them red-penned every afternoon until I really honed my craft. So I really started off as an intern press secretary in Canberra.
Did you see yourself at that point? Did you ever think, I could go into politics?
Yes, I did fancy a tilt at politics. And you can't work in Canberra and not be fascinated by or sucked into the machine. So, yes, I was actually asked by the Liberal Party a couple of times if I would think about standing as a candidate over the years. And, of course, I did, but it was a bit of a Christina Keneally moment. I was never going to be anyone's girl or anyone's puppet. So I was never going to be their token woman.
How did you end up? You went from government, when you graduated, you started working in accounting firms.
Yes.
How?
So I did actually join the public service when I graduated university. That internship led to a role.
Yeah.
There's a whole windy road between here and there, but when I left the public service, which I'd only been there 5 minutes, I resigned, and everyone said, don't resign, you're mad. Take leave without pay. You can always come back. There was this safety net mentality. Of course, I'm not one for the safety net. I ended up taking a maternity leave cover in 1990 something. I came back to Sydney and I took a mat leave cover at BDO.
Right.
For 6 or 9 months, which turned into 4.5 years. And then while I was at BDO, PwC decided that they would push down into the mid-market and the private client space. And my experience in a mid-tier firm at BDO made me attractive to PwC, and I joined PwC to help them with their global mid-markets and private client strategy work.
And you spent 8 years in accounting before you joined where you are now, which is GHD, which we'll get into later because you've been at GHD for 15 plus years, so which is amazing. But thinking back to those 8 years in accounting as a business development marketing person in accounting, what did that sector teach you? What did you learn from that sector?
I think, from a professional services point of view, you learn to understand the partner model and the structure of professional services firms, how money is made, how those businesses actually make money, the politics of partner decision making, the career trajectories for the professionals in the space. And I think in the accounting firms in particular, what I really loved was the exposure to so many different types of client organizations. You really learned a lot about business and how various business sectors work. So for me, it was a really good founding in business fundamentals. And of course, you had to learn about accounting and how to read a P&L and a balance sheet and what makes businesses tick. So it was a really great founding, broad business founding.
At what point did you notice that your career was moving from pure comms into what it is now, which is more business development, client relationship management?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I think if you're a born salesperson, and, I had some time in real estate and a few other sectors in marketing roles, but I really understood the beast and the DNA of selling. So I think the great combination is if you're a marketer with a sales bent, or in fact a born salesperson with marketing skills, the two things go really well together. So moving to the business development side of the fence, helping clients to buy the right solutions for them was just a natural transition for my DNA, and marketing was my skill set. What was in the swag bag was marketing, but the DNA was sales.
How did you manage culturally? Because you said earlier when we talked about politics, we touched on politics, and you said I wasn't going to be anybody's girl, I wasn't going to be just the token woman. And yet we know, particularly back in that time, accounting was very male dominated. As a profession. So how did you go working in organizations that were quite male dominated at that time?
It's actually, I've worked in the construction space, master builders, real estate space. I actually work really well with men. And sometimes the joke is made, that I'm a man trapped in a woman's body.
That's another podcast altogether, Sonia. Is another podcast.
Entirely. That's a whole body of work. People are making a career out of that thinking. But for me, I work really well with men. When I was at uni, actually, one of my first gigs, which ended up being paid, I was actually a rugby league journo for a season.
Wow.
And so I think I get men's way of working. I get that uber masculinity that sometimes can be off-putting for women. I think I understand it quite well. And so it's never been a challenge for me to I feel like my female perspective and the diversity I've brought to the table in male-dominated businesses has been useful.
Let's take a deep dive and review what we've heard so far. Firstly, it's really refreshing to hear that early on she knew she wanted to always win at work and be the best she could be, whatever she ended up doing. This confidence and zest for life has clearly been a contributing factor in her success. Her early years as an intern gave her her first break in government, and as she says, many government employees never leave. But by backing herself and taking a different direction to A, join an accounting firm, and B, take a contract role, was the beginning of an amazing career in professional services, helped by the fact that she had gained a broad understanding of commercial business and recognised that she was a born salesperson. Also, it's interesting to hear how she approaches working in male-dominated environments and confidently brings a female perspective to the table. Let's return to the interview to hear how she took this experience to GHD. And you moved to GHD over 15 years ago, as I referenced, and You've had several roles with them, but I'm interested to know, what is it about GHD and that sector that's kept you engaged for such a long time?
It's a really interesting space. Then the nature of the work is it's still professional services, right? So you're still selling consulting hours to help others solve their business problems. I think the distinction between, say, legal, accounting, and the engineering environment and architecture built environment space is you see what you build, you see what you design.
Yeah.
And you have the opportunity to shape communities in both a physical and social way that's so different.
Mm. And but the projects are quite long, aren't they? Like, they're long lead time projects.
Yes, well, one of my favourite children, the Western Sydney Airport, I was the original business development person on that opportunity at GHD. And when I pitched it to our executive, it was a 10-year pursuit and probably 15 years from pursuit to actual a plane on the tarmac.
Wow.
So we opened that pursuit in 2011. And, planes will probably fly or land there in 2025, 2026. So it really has been 14, 15 years. So you have to have this enormous vision to start with, and then the resilience to follow an opportunity on the very twisty road that it will take before there's actually concrete or planes or people touching the asset.
There's quite a lot of patience required.
Yes, I call it the long game. I'm a golfer. So there's the short game and the long game, and major infrastructure pursuits are all about the long game.
Long game. And how has the world of engineering changed in the time that you've been in it? And both from a sort of professional services delivery perspective, and also from an opportunity for business development professionals perspective. So there's two questions in there. I suppose the first one, really, the major one, is what's happened in the world of engineering? Because it looks to me from the outside in that they become far more than just engineers. They've moved into advisory and all sorts of. So why don't you tell us what's happened in that space while you've been there for 15 years?
Yeah, so good observation. I mean, the whole entire sector has been forced to diversify its offer and its disciplines. So you still design linear infrastructure, roads, pipes, railway lines, things that enable the movement of goods and people, or buildings. But I think a couple of big things: the cognition of how the built environment interacts with the natural environment has obviously transformed globally in the last 15 or 20 years. Climate change was a debate around, 15, 20 years ago. Was climate change real? And now you look where we are in global agreements. And what happens at COP, for example, the emergence of ESG. So the big things I've seen is infrastructure, not just for its own sake, but the context in which it now operates. Environmental approval has certainly become more sophisticated and more important. Social sustainability, the way people interact with infrastructure now, the human element in design is as important as the technical and the hard engineering or the hard architecture. And then the impacts on environment and how you create a legacy and something that is sustainable both economically, socially, and physically is tough. And you see the emergence of the advisory businesses, as you mentioned, making something technically sound and well engineered or architected is only a quarter of the puzzle now.
Mm. And so
we've all had to change.
What roles would a BD marketing professional play in that space? And what have you seen in your time there in terms of the size of the team and the types of people that come into the team?
Yeah, interesting. I dropped a note to some people the other day. We're working on AI in the tender and bid process. And I said, can you believe in this career that we've gone from carbon paper to AI in the bid process? And so, it's less than a lifetime. It's only a portion of your career where we've gone from, typing tenders and carbon copy copies to now creating AI prompts and getting to a bronze draft of a tender with the help of AI. So a lot's changed. For us, as you traverse the marketing as you traverse the marketing to BD spectrum of our career paths, I think the lines have blurred significantly between marketing, comms, and BD. So I think if you work in the marketing space and you're looking at campaign space, thought leadership, you're really in the demand generation game now. And you've got to be joined at the hip with the BD family. You know, who would have thought we would have account-based marketers using Salesforce and cloud and actually tracking individual prospects and lead nurturing? That work is so different to a time when an accountant or an engineer went out and had lunch with a prospective client. You know, it's so much more sophisticated. The tools that are available to us are just so mind-blowingly incomprehensible if you wound the clock back 15, 20 years. And now this convergence between the technology world as a marketing toolbox, there are so many new career pathways and new types of work that you can play in this space. I love it.
Hi, I'm Katie Rosser, co-founder of Seldon Rosser, and we are passionate about helping people maximise the return on their own career investment. Visit seldonrosser.com to see a range of career opportunities and access career guides and market information such as salary surveys and articles. Our career goal is to help you get your next great job and make your own big splash in the world of work.
So your title now is you're the Global Chief Client Officer, GHD. So what does that mean?
So I'm on our global executive.
Right.
So that role is part of our global executive. So we have a CEO, chief risk, chief information, chief strat, all of those sort of traditional roles. And my really role is to look at where might we go next? Take a 10-year, take a 20-year view. Which markets, which clients, which industry sectors? Where should we invest? Double down? What might we exit? What are the big emerging issues in industry that we want to talk to clients or talk to the market about? So it's a long game strategic role that plays out day to day in how you deliver quality work and relationships to either current clients or prospect the next generation of clients or markets.
Sounds like a massive job, and it's one you do from Sydney, Australia. So how do you manage a global job like that from Australia?
Well, there's the post-COVID version of it and the during COVID version of the role, because I took on the role and 5 minutes later, COVID was the thing. Doing a global role out of Australia is really interesting because I think Australians are very creative. You've lived on the island, you've had to be the mother of invention, and you are forced to collaborate globally when you're in Australia because you've got to bring great ideas from all over the world to the island nation. So I think we've been naturally very good collaborators. How do I do the role? I've got a lot of great people all over the world in my team, and we catch up regularly. You have to have a high degree of trust that they all know what the plan is, what their part in the plan, and trust them then to execute it well. And you have to be prepared to work wacky hours. So sometimes I have calls at 1 a.m. to meet with my friends in the Northern Hemisphere, and they might go till, 6 in the morning. So the Australian end of the next day, you have to get good at day sleeping.
Have blackout curtains.
Yes, indeed. Friendly neighbours who don't make too much noise. Yeah, look, I love the challenge of the global connectivity. We're in 15 countries. They're all quite different. And speaking 3 languages at least now officially in the business, but there are many more spoken. And the diversity has actually been good for us, really interesting, and representative of our clients. They're all unique and different, so we must be too.
Yeah. Now, you describe yourself on LinkedIn as energetic, resilient, and accountable. How are these qualities? How and why are these qualities important, do you think?
I think the energetic thing is I'm a bit of a finisher completer. So I always need to know more, and I'm not satisfied until I've looked under every rock. So you must have energy to live that way. The resilient thing, I think, I just don't take no for an answer. If I hear no, I'm like, surely that's a maybe. Maybe we could come back at that from another angle and try again. So, and taking some gut punches, if your bid win rate's low, you're 50% of the time you're a loser. So you have to know how to get back up off the canvas. So I think you must be resilient or you just can't enjoy the work. And the accountable piece, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've never run over budget. If I have to make tough decisions, they're on me, but I'll do it. And the successes are celebrated by everyone. The successes are not mine, they're the team's. So, yeah, I think it's that sense of personal responsibility for the number, the well-being of the team, and the outcome for the client.
And professional services firms are known to be highly complex decision-making businesses. How do you navigate? What tips would you give people sort of more junior in their career who are faced with the challenge of having to get things done in a highly political, complex decision-making environment? What's your sort of strategy for getting things done or influencing people internally?
Yeah, I love that when you interview anyone coming into prof services who's in a non-command and control role, we all say, oh, you're coming into an influencing role. And then you have to grapple with what does that mean? And I think the distinction I've come to over the years is there's a fine line in the decision-making process that is mostly consultation. And we sometimes fall into the trap, particularly in partnership businesses where we seek consensus. And so I think understanding the distinction between a decision that is made collaboratively versus consensus decision making. If you wait for everyone to agree, you can be paralyzed. And so finding the maturity in how you work through the organization to find whose influence or input into the decision actually matters versus where can I quickly move on? When have I consulted enough?
Do you ever feel overwhelmed in a job like yours? Like it's a pretty full-on job and you've got weird hours to work and then you've got all of these responsibilities. Do you ever feel overwhelmed by what's in front of you?
Well, don't tell anyone, but I felt completely overwhelmed for like 25 years. And that's the art, I think, is not to let the wave wash over you, is to keep your head above the water and keep sucking in the big breaths. It is completely overwhelming. And anyone who tells you it's not is not telling the truth. I can't use the word liar, but it is overwhelming. The work is never done. There's so many stakeholders. There's so many problems in the world that need fixing. There's so many business challenges that just keep coming. It's completely overwhelming. And for me, it's how do you organize the filing cabinet in your mind so that you can deal with important, urgent, strategic, tactical work and divide your time appropriately to the role and the things in front of you.
You have to be rigorous in organization of your time by the sounds of things.
Yes. And there's never enough time. So don't pretend that you can do everything. And there'll always be more things on the to-do list. You just scrub off the top and add to the bottom. How do you manage the emotional impact of never feeling like you get to the bottom of the list?
How do you?
I think it's just the acceptance that comes with experience. And I probably spent, I would say in prof services, probably the first 10 years I was in it, I absolutely flogged myself. Crazy hours. I always felt underdone, had the imposter syndrome, didn't matter how hard I worked. I didn't feel like I was getting enough done or the results were good enough. And some day you just wake up and you realize your best is actually best in class and or good enough. And that I felt like, maybe 32, 33, I felt like my work was good and that I should stop flogging myself to prove a point that others had also noticed I was useful.
There comes a time, I think, with age and experience where you realize that actually you are the expert.
Yes, that's been a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Like I'm in my 50s now, and all of a sudden, you're a Hall of Famer and you're not a young professional anymore. And the conversation always used to be, oh, well, you'll understand when you've got a little bit more experience, or you're young, it will come. And now people are asking me, what are my retirement plans? I'm like, I went from never knowing enough to now being the grey hair and half out the door.
I think what we need to do is there are always these lists, 30 under 30, 40 under 40, 50 under 50. We need like 50 over 50, don't we? We need a list of, because I'm 55 this year and I feel like I'm only just now working out how to be a really good recruiter. And I'm 55.
And you're best in class.
And I'm best in class. I can say that, Sonia. I am best in class. Thank you for giving me permission to own it.
Yes, indeed, you are. I recommend you to everyone in prof services.
You were well known. You were the president of the APAC's largest marketing association, which was called APSMA at the time, which was the Australasian Professional Services Marketing Association. It's now been rebranded as ICON a few years ago. And you were a very charismatic, very dynamic president, if you don't mind me saying, for 4 years. Thinking back now, what advice would you give someone starting a career in professional services?
I think a couple of things about prof services. I think it is the hardest marketing in the world. Of any of the marketing professions, B2B is really difficult. There are so many strands that you can pull in this profession. You have so many diverse audiences to speak to, right through from, scientific buyers, technical buyers, C-suite buyers, NEDs. You've always got so many stakeholders to talk to. So I think decide not being a one-trick pony, what you want to be famous for, or who you want to be an expert in speaking to, but really craft your skills. Figure out what you need in your toolbox to have the diverse career of your dreams. You look at the number of roles I've had. You can take 5 or 6 different paths over a 10 or 15-year journey and still not be done. So I think it's a place where you can have the career of your dreams. You can flip from marketing to BD. You could flip into the profession. And my other tip is probably think about crafting your personal brand and don't be too rigid to stick with it forever. But who are you? What do you want to stand for? How do you want people to know you? And it's a bit like a can of Coke. You need to be consistent. You need to always show up. You need to be great when you're there. You need to be a really good product. You need to be on. Who are you? What's the packaging you come with and what's inside the can? And bring it every day.
Good advice. When you think now about what's happened over your career in professional services, get a crystal ball out. What are your audacious predictions for what the future of business development marketing might look like in professional services?
There's no denying technology will continue to play a bigger and bigger part. So how do you, and I'm a bit of a dinosaur, right? People make a joke about my interactions with technology. I haven't let it pass me by, but I've resisted the urge to dabble and try to be expert in every piece of the technology. There are other people, digital natives, who are way better than me. So I think deciding where you need a working knowledge versus a finely honed set of skills and letting others be the experts and others hold the platform in the room is critical. And the thing for me that will never go away is people who are good at relationships with people, both internally in the business and with clients, and who can read the room, shape a conversation, read the nuance in the human relationship. No machine can ever do that.
No.
And so I think if you've got a good toolbox of technical skills and some human insight, you'll be indispensable.
And I think one of the things that we're seeing about AI is very good at sort of drafting or giving you a different way of thinking about how to approach a particular subject, but it doesn't do that human to human. It doesn't inspire in the same way, I suppose. And we all learn from each other in our careers. Who have you learned from?
I've learned from a couple of really good people along the way. The fellow who red-penned my press releases when I was an intern did it with love and kindness because he wanted me to be good at my craft, and he explained why he corrected my work the way he did. And then he mentored me for several years thereafter. And even now, I occasionally bump into him, and he's so thrilled to see where my career has gone. So I think finding a mentor who really wants to sponsor your success and who speaks on your behalf and introduces you to others, that's been really great for me. The other people who've inspired me along the way are people who've done fantastic service to their industry or service to the community. They've done more than their job. They've made a difference in how their profession has left the world or the community or the environment. So I'm looking for those people who inspire. And then I've really have enjoyed, having had an arts degree, my interaction with the finance people. I've tried to be a sponge and learn from them because their world's been so foreign to me. And quite a few along the way have been very generous with their knowledge and tolerant of my ignorance and my silly questions.
And when you look back on your career, what has surprised or delighted you about your journey so far?
I think the diversity of the work, the having the chance to do things for the first time, the firsts, the creating something new, the PwC CEO survey, for example, those things. When you give birth to something and it lasts 20 years and you look back and you see other people refine it, make it better, turn it into something new, the firsts, I think, are really great. Watching young people who you've mentored grow with confidence into their profession, people who really want to commit to the profession and stay in it. If I've been able to influence someone's choice when they could have gone and joined a sexy FMCG brand or joined a sexy telco brand, and they've stayed in prof services, I feel like I've done good work for the profession in making it somewhere that people want to stay.
And how do you stay yourself relevant in terms of all the knowledge and all the trends and all the new things that are coming to market? Like, are there, in a senior role like the role that you've got, in the expert role that you have, what do you listen to, read? What recommendations would you have for others about stuff that you can just tune into that moves your knowledge on a notch?
Yeah, there's a little bit of fear in that question, because asking yourself, am I still relevant? When will I not be relevant? When will I know that I've become irrelevant? For me, I've always been a bit of a sponge. I read every paper, every economic review. I read industry magazines so that I can talk to our clients about the sectors in which they're playing. I read books, like here's one right now, Customer Experience Strategy.
Show and tell.
Selling, yeah. Every consultant must read David Maister's The Trusted Advisor. That's foundational.
Right.
I don't know, I'm just a sponge. Like, I'm always reading 6 or 8 books at a time, and every world paper from around the world, and trying to stay on top of the politics in a region. Just voracious. And making room in your mind so you can fit new information. You've got to get the old stuff out.
You obviously work really hard. What do you do when you're not working? Do you have time to do anything when you're not working?
So I'm an absolute golf tragic. I do play golf twice a week, and it seems anachronistic, I know, but I love it.
Yeah.
And I think because I'm from the country, it's the nearest thing to being on the farm that you can have in town. And it's good to, beat the boys at their own game occasionally. You're back to this thing about working in a male-dominated industry. There's nowhere previously more male than the golf course. Love it. And I grow orchids.
Wow. Talk about the long game. They are a long game. They are a long play, for sure.
Oh, 4 or 5 years, no flower. It's like, really, I fertilized you, I watered you, I moved you into the sun, you give me nothing.
My last question for you. Thinking back to when you first started, you said at the very beginning of this podcast, I wanted to be a high flyer. You are a high flyer. How does it feel?
That's too funny. Very kind. It's funny. I don't think of myself that way at all. I'm a servant to my sector and my organization, and I do it completely without ego. It's not for me.
Have you never taken a moment to just sit and think to yourself, wow, look where I am now?
I have a little bit in the last couple of years, and people ask you to speak at an industry event, and I'm really passionate about trying to really change the lives of women in STEAM, for example. I want 12-year-old girls to think that it's cool to work in engineering, or that you can have an arts degree and have a career in this space. Yeah, I don't know. I never think I've done anything remarkable, but then when I sat at the Icon conference this year, and I looked at all the shiny, beautiful young people starting off their career, I did feel a sense of achievement that, we all struggled for so long for people from our side of the tracks to be able to make partner in big firms and to actually be at the top table. I'm occupying the seat for the next generation, and hopefully we've done the hard work so that it's easier for those who come behind us.
Well, you are an orchid of the profession, and you finally bloomed. And I think what's so brilliant about what we've both done, because we've both been a similar age, you and I, we've both been around a similar amount of time. It is amazing to go to an association conference and see not just 50 people in a room like there were, 20 years ago, but 300, 400 people in a room, and look at all the amazing careers that are only made possible by those that went first 20 odd years ago. So I congratulate you and thank you for the work that you've done for the profession. And also I think you are inspiring for anybody wanting to move into a role in engineering, but women in particular. You've done it and others could do it too. Thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. I think you've just been so inspiring. It's been lovely to catch up with you.
Thanks, Graham. It's been nice to be beside you in the industry for more than the last 20 years.